They thought she didn't belong, a quiet black girl in the back of an elite physics lecture, where every glance told her she was out of place. But when one of the toughest professors on campus tried to humiliate her, she did the unthinkable, solved one of the hardest problems ever written on that board, in front of the entire department. What happened next left the room speechless, and the campus buzzing. If you're into stories where arrogance gets humbled and brilliance shines through, hit that like button and subscribe. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and every click helps. Watch until the end, because this is one of those moments that flips everything upside down. There was something about how she walked into the lecture hall, quiet, cautious, eyes scanning for a seat in the back row. Her name was Amara Wells. She was 17, though her transcript said 18. A small lie her guidance counselor had suggested to avoid unnecessary questions. She carried a worn-out backpack, a second-hand calculator, and the kind of silence that made her invisible to most of the room, except, of course, to those who were waiting for her to fail. Whitford University wasn't built for people like her, not just because she was young or black, or from a public high school in a neighborhood that didn't show up on college brochures, but because she didn't carry the smug confidence of the legacy students, the ones who walked like they owned the hallways. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to study physics, something that had made sense to her since she was 9 years old. Lying on her bedroom floor watching a documentary about black holes on a borrowed DVD. But no documentary could have prepared her for the culture shock. That was advanced theoretical physics too. The room smelled like old books and new money. Conversations floated around her in rehearsed tones. Internships at research labs, private tutors, prep school rivalries. She didn't speak. No one spoke to her. That morning, Amara had arrived 20 minutes early, hoping to sit unnoticed. She was skimming through her notes when the room fell into a sudden, synchronized silence. Not the natural hush of students settling, but the heavy pause that comes with authority. He walked in like gravity bent around him, Professor Henry Callahan, a name that echoed through Whitford's science department like both legend and warning, known for his ruthless grading, his unwillingness to repeat himself, and his ability to dismantle overconfident students with a single sarcastic remark. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a three-piece suit that screamed tenure, he scanned the room as if measuring its worth. And then his eyes landed on her. He didn't say anything, just a flicker of a smirk, a glance that lasted half a second too long, but she felt it. Everyone else did too. Callahan's voice cut through the air like a blade. Let's begin with a simple problem, shall we? One any of you should have mastered by now, assuming you didn't sleep through high school. He turned to the board and began writing, dense symbols, equations that spiraled into chaos for most students. Amara watched in silence, her pencil resting on the page. She knew this one, had solved a similar version of it 2 weeks ago, for fun, just to see if she still could. As Callahan finished scribbling, he turned to face the room. Anyone? Silence. No hands. Not even my star scholarship students, he added, eyes darting toward the front row, where the golden boys and girls sat, silent, sweating. Amara's hand didn't move. She wasn't stupid. She knew what would happen if she spoke. Callahan smiled, enjoying the tension. Nothing. Fascinating. And just as he was about to solve it himself, his eyes flicked back toward the rear corner of the room. You, he said, pointing. Her heart stopped. Yes, you. The one pretending to be invisible. Do you have an answer, or are you simply enjoying the air conditioning? A few students chuckled. Amara's throat tightened, but she stood, slowly, carefully. I believe the integral's been misapplied, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Callahan raised an eyebrow. Misapplied, you say? Care to enlighten the rest of us? Amara took a step forward. The derivation assumes the system is closed, but the boundary conditions suggest otherwise. That throws off the energy distribution. For a moment, Callahan just stared at her. Then he smiled, not kindly. Interesting, he said. Then by all means, correct me. The room shifted. Students leaned forward. Some whispered. A challenge had been issued, and she had just walked into it. Amara stepped slowly toward the front of the lecture hall. Every step sounded louder than it should. Her sneakers, faded and quiet, seemed to echo against the polished tile. She could feel the eyes, all of them watching, judging. Some were amused, others annoyed. A few looked curious, and a small number, the most dangerous ones, looked hungry. Hungry for a failure they could gossip about for days. Callahan stepped aside like a magician handing over the stage. "The chalk is yours," he said, his voice laced with something between sarcasm and invitation. She stood before the board, gripping the chalk between her fingers. Her heart pounded. Her mind, though, was calm, focused in that familiar way it always was when she stared at a problem and let everything else melt away. The original equation sprawled across the board in elegant, ruthless detail. Callahan's handwriting was precise, intimidating, the kind that dared you to challenge it. Amara didn't hesitate. She circled a section in the middle and underlined a specific term near the bottom. "The flaw is here," she said, not turning to face them. "You treated the field as static, but in this scenario, there's energy flux crossing the boundary. That means we're dealing with a dynamic system." She erased part of the equation with the side of her hand, then rewrote it, correcting the boundary conditions and adjusting the integral accordingly. Her chalk moved quickly, confidently. No pauses, no second guesses. The room was dead silent. Someone coughed near the front. Another student whispered, "Wait, is she right?" Callahan watched her without blinking. Arms crossed. No reaction. When she finally stepped back from the board, she turned around and looked directly at him. "I believe this is the correct solution," she said. Not boastful, just factual. Callahan stepped forward, slowly examining her work. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, "Well, that's certainly one way to approach it." A ripple of suppressed laughter broke across the room. Some students relaxed, others stiffened. "But it's not the only way," Callahan added, lifting the chalk. "Let's try something a bit more rigorous." He erased the board entirely, then began scrawling out a far more complex equation. Symbols most students hadn't seen yet. A layered mess of variables and concepts that belonged in postgraduate research, not an undergrad lecture. Amara blinked. She recognized some of it, but it was a leap, a deliberate escalation. Callahan finished writing, then turned back to her. "Why don't you try this one, Miss Wells, was it?" She nodded. "Let's see how deep your understanding really goes." There was a chill in his voice now. This wasn't curiosity. It was a test designed to break her. The students shifted uncomfortably. Some of them felt the shift in the air. The line between instruction and humiliation had just been crossed. Amara didn't move at first. She stared at the board, eyes scanning the complexity. Her mind was racing, pulling at threads, isolating variables. She didn't have the answer yet, but she had something better, a starting point. She stepped forward. "You're using a modified Hamiltonian model," she said slowly. "But if I'm not mistaken, this version assumes an idealized constraint that doesn't hold in a real-world scenario." "May I?" Callahan said nothing, just stepped back again. And she began. She didn't solve it completely, not yet. But she broke it down, line by line, explained the inconsistencies, identified the flawed assumptions. She was building the foundation for a solution. And in doing so, she was doing something even more powerful. She was taking control of the room. One student leaned over and whispered to another, "Who is she?" Callahan didn't stop her, but he didn't look pleased. When she finally paused, halfway through simplifying the problem, she turned to him again. "I'll need time to solve it completely, but I'm confident it's solvable if you reframe it using relativistic conditions." Callahan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Then I suggest you use that time wisely." He took the chalk from her hand, turning back to the class. "For the rest of you," he said, "there will be a quiz on this next week. Assuming anyone else here is still brave enough to show up." The room chuckled nervously, but no one was laughing at her. Amara returned to her seat, heart still pounding, hands slightly trembling, but somewhere beneath it all, a flicker of something new. Not pride, not yet, but possibility. After that first class, Amara walked through campus with a different kind of silence. It wasn't the quiet of being unseen. It was the quiet that follows after something loud, something undeniable. Whispers floated behind her as she passed. Some students stared, others quickly looked away. A few offered glances of curiosity, and one even nodded, barely, but it was there. She wasn't used to that. In her dorm that night, she sat on the edge of her bed, running through the equation Callahan had challenged her with. Her notebook was filled with diagrams, scribbles, and half-solved integrals. She was close, she could feel it. It wasn't just about the problem anymore. It was about proving she deserved to be there. To herself, to him, to everyone. Her roommate, Jess, leaned in the doorway with a protein bar and a raised eyebrow. "You know you just declared war on Callahan, right?" Amara looked up, smirking. "I didn't mean to. He called on me." Jess laughed. "You corrected him. In front of the entire class. That man eats students for breakfast. I didn't correct him. I just questioned the setup." Jess gave her a look. "Same thing. But hey, that was badass." Amara didn't reply. She wasn't trying to be badass. She was just trying to survive. The next lecture came faster than she expected. This time, she arrived just on time, and the energy in the room was different. Charged. Like everyone was waiting for something to happen. Callahan entered like always, sharp, confident, unreadable. But today, he didn't start with a problem. He started with a story. In 1967, he said, to physicists proposed a model that challenged the accepted laws of quantum theory. They were ridiculed, laughed out of symposiums. One of them quit the field entirely. The other published under a pseudonym for the rest of his career. He paused. And yet, 20 years later, their model was proven correct. He looked around the room, then locked eyes with Amara. Sometimes, questioning authority is foolish. Other times, it's necessary. The difference lies in whether you can back it up. The message was clear, and so was the challenge. Then he turned and started writing again. Today's lesson, less antagonistic but still complex. Amara took notes, absorbing everything, staying quiet. She wouldn't challenge him today, not yet. But she was preparing. She could feel it in her bones. Another moment would come. After class, as students filed out, a few lingered near her. One guy leaned in, whispering, "Hey, did you really solve that thing last time?" She nodded, cautiously. "I'm working on the full solution." "That was insane," he said. He never lets anyone challenge him like that. Another girl chimed in. "Are you like a prodigy or something?" Amara shook her head. "Just someone who reads a lot." They laughed, a real laugh this time, not mocking. And that's when she felt it for the first time. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was being seen. But not everyone appreciated it. Later that afternoon, in the faculty lounge, Callahan sat across from Dr. Levinson, another professor in the department. They sipped coffee, papers scattered between them. "She's sharp," Levinson said casually. "Very sharp." Callahan didn't look up. "She's bold. There's a difference." Callahan finally glanced up. "There's a line between curiosity and arrogance." "I'm still deciding where she falls," Levinson smiled, unimpressed. "Don't take it personally, Henry. You've just never had anyone talk back before." "It wasn't talking back," he replied. "It was posturing. Or maybe," Levinson said, leaning in, "it was just someone who's better at physics than you expected." Callahan said nothing, but his silence was louder than any argument. A week later, the classroom buzzed with anticipation before Callahan even arrived. Word had spread, not just about the confrontation, but about what was coming. People whispered phrases like "he's going to bury her," and "I heard he's bringing in grad-level material." Amara felt it too. The weight, the setup. She wasn't nervous, not in the usual sense. She was alert, focused. Like a chess player walking into a match already knowing she was 3 moves behind. Jess had warned her the night before. "He's not just going to test you. He's going to try to humiliate you," she said, lying on her bed with a half-eaten bag of popcorn. "He wants to remind everyone that he's the one with power." "I know," Amara said. "That's why I've been practicing." "Practicing?" "Amara, you're solving problems from journals." She had been. Every night. Pulling equations from advanced research publications. Training like it was a sport. Not because she had something to prove to him, but because she had everything to prove to herself. That morning, Callahan walked in carrying a single piece of paper. Not a textbook, not a lecture outline, just one sheet. He didn't say good morning, didn't greet the class. He simply walked to the board and began writing. It wasn't a problem. It was a challenge, a brutal, multi-layered equation involving tensor calculus, relativistic dynamics, and nested integrals that would make most grad students pause. Students began shifting in their seats before he was halfway through. When he finally turned around, he didn't look at anyone else, just her. "Today, we'll discuss solutions under non-inertial reference frames," he said. "I imagine at least one of you is eager to volunteer." No one moved. Amara exhaled, stood up, and walked to the front. The silence was deafening. She studied the board, eyes narrowing. This wasn't just difficult. It was cruel, a known unsolvable variant designed to test endurance more than intellect. It didn't have a clean solution, not unless you reframed it, which meant she had a chance. She turned slowly, speaking not just to Callahan, but to the entire room. "This equation is unstable as written. It doesn't converge under standard conditions." Callahan raised an eyebrow. "And yet, here it is, because it's meant to break you," she said plainly. "Unless you know how to break it first." A murmur went through the room. Amara picked up the chalk and began rewriting part of the equation. Not solving, reframing. She shifted the coordinate system, applied a transformation matrix, and introduced a stabilizing function. She explained each step as she went, calm and measured. It didn't solve the entire problem, but it cracked it open. And in doing so, she proved something even more valuable than an answer. She understood the game better than he thought. Callahan watched her with a hard stare. He didn't interrupt, didn't correct her. When she stepped back, he approached the board and studied her work. Then he turned to the class and said, "This is incomplete." She nodded. "I said it was unstable, but this framing offers a path forward." He paused, then handed her the paper he'd brought in. "This was solved fully in 1983 by a team in Zurich," he said. "Find out how. Due next week." Class dismissed. Students sat frozen, unsure if it was over. It was. They began packing up, whispering again. But now, the whispers had changed. They weren't mocking her anymore. They were impressed. And Callahan? He walked out without another word. Later that night, Amara sat in the campus library with the paper spread out before her. The Zurich team had done exactly what she'd started to do, reframed the problem, stabilized it, solved it. She smiled. She wasn't chasing his approval. She was chasing the truth, and she was getting closer. The Zurich paper opened a new world for Amara. For days, she pored over it, not just studying the solution, but tracing the logic, the mistakes corrected, the breakthroughs hidden in obscure notation. It wasn't just physics anymore. It was philosophy in numbers. A war of ideas, quiet, brutal, elegant. And for the first time, she felt something shift inside her, not fear, not pressure, control. She knew the terrain now, knew what Callahan was doing. He wasn't just testing her knowledge, he was testing her stamina, her self-worth, her place in the ecosystem of power and silence that Whitford had perfected over decades. But what he hadn't realized, what no one in that room understood yet, was that Amara Wells didn't just study physics. She thought in physics. Each equation was a language, each boundary condition a memory, each challenge a mirror. The next lecture was different. When Callahan walked in, he didn't look at her. Not once. He handed out a problem set, 10 questions, each more complex than the last. A quiet dare in the form of numbers and ink. "This will count toward your midterm," he said. "You have for days." The class groaned. Amara took the packet and flipped through it. She recognized 3 of the problems. The rest were twisted, restructured versions of known theorems, like traps with only one narrow exit. She stayed after class, walking up to his desk with the packet in hand. He didn't look up. "I'd like to work on the final problem first," she said. "It's the only one that hasn't been published before." Callahan raised his eyes slowly. "You're assuming I want you to solve it. I'm assuming you wouldn't include it unless you thought someone might try." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You think I'm playing games, Miss Wells. I think you're playing your game," she said. "I'm just not playing it the way you want me to." The room had emptied. It was just the 2 of them now. The the weight of silence between them as dense as anything either of them had put on a board. He tilted his head. "You're smart," he said, "but smart people often burn out here, especially when they confuse ego with excellence." Amara didn't blink. "I'm not confused, and I'm not here for your approval." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a slight nod, he replied, "Good, because you won't get it." She turned and walked out, and for the first time, he watched her go. Back in her dorm, the problem consumed her. She skipped dinner, skipped sleep. The 10th question was a monster, elegant, impossible, beautiful. It was a trap disguised as a gift, and she loved it. By sunrise, she had 3 different approaches mapped out and a 4th halfway proven. Her walls were covered in notes, her hands stained with ink and marker. She felt alive in a way nothing else had ever made her feel. The next day, she handed in the packet first. Callahan didn't say a word, but when he flipped to the last page, his brow furrowed, just slightly. She'd solved it, not fully, but far enough to prove she saw the core of it, farther than anyone else in the room would get. After class, Levinson caught up with her in the hallway. "Amara," he said, adjusting his glasses, "what you did today, that was impressive." She smiled politely. "Thank you, sir." He leaned in. "Don't let him break you." Her smile faded. "I'm not here to win a fight," she said. "I'm here to learn." Levinson nodded. "That may be the only reason you'll survive this place." She walked away, unaware that Callahan had been watching them from his office window the whole time. 2 days after submitting her problem set, Amara was called into the physics department office. She thought maybe it was a clerical thing, a scholarship form, or a scheduling error. But when she walked in, Callahan was waiting, not behind a desk, standing, hands clasped behind his back. "I thought we might speak privately," he said, "about the problem you solved." Amara paused in the doorway. "Was there an issue?" "No," he said. "Just a curiosity." He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat, cautiously. Callahan walked slowly to the bookshelf, then turned. "You're a first year. You're barely 18. You have no published work, no lab recommendations, and you didn't come from a feeder school. Yet you solved a modified Navier-Stokes equation variant most graduate students avoid." He didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like an accusation. "I studied," she said simply. He nodded slowly. "That's one explanation." There was a long silence. Then, in a voice more thoughtful than condescending, he asked, "What exactly are you trying to prove?" Amara looked him in the eye. "That I belong here." His expression didn't change, but something in the room did. "I see," he said quietly. "And what if I told you? You don't need to prove it to me." She blinked. "Then why keep testing me?" He smiled faintly. "To see how far you'll go." That afternoon, a notice appeared on the classroom board. Physics Academic Tournament, Whitford Regional Selection. All students eligible. 1 student will be chosen to represent the university in the National Invitational. Professor Callahan, supervisor. Whispers erupted instantly. "They haven't done that in years. Is he really organizing it himself? Who do you think it's for?" Everyone knew. Callahan didn't say it publicly, but he'd just placed a mountain between her and recognition, or humiliation. Amara stared at the notice. She could walk away. No one would blame her. But she didn't. She signed her name. That night, her dorm turned into a war room. She built her own study routine, not just solving past problems, but building her endurance. Equations at 2 a.m., quantum models during breakfast. Jess watched her with both admiration and concern. "You know he's going to try to break you again," Jess said. Amara nodded. "Then I need to be unbreakable." Across campus, Callahan met with the dean. "She's registering for the tournament," the dean said, stirring his coffee. "That's bold. She has potential," Callahan replied. "But raw potential isn't enough. I want to see if she can operate under real pressure." The dean raised an eyebrow. "You sound invested." Callahan didn't answer. The day of the tournament arrived. The lecture hall was repurposed. A long table set at the front, to whiteboards behind, and chairs for 3 faculty judges. Only 5 students qualified, but only two mattered: Amara and Wesley Quinn, a senior, research assistant, and Whitford's golden boy for the past 3 years. When the first question hit the board, Wesley smirked. He was fast, confident, aggressive. Amara was methodical, quiet, surgical, precise. Round after round, they traded wins. The final round was brutal, a theoretical design challenge requiring not just math, but conceptual innovation. Wesley leaned into flashy answers, throwing in buzzwords and references to recent papers. Amara paused, then did what she always did best. She rewrote the problem, approached it sideways. By the end of the final round, to things were obvious, she had outperformed him. Most of the room couldn't believe it. The judges whispered. Callahan said nothing. Then the head judge stood. For the 2025 Whitford representative in the National Physics Invitational, we select Amara Wells. The room didn't explode. It didn't clap. It exhaled, as if holding its breath the whole time. Wesley looked stunned, furious. Callahan didn't look at her. He simply gathered his papers and left the room. Winning the tournament didn't feel like winning. Not at first. Amara stood alone as the room emptied, holding the announcement paper in one hand like it might dissolve if she blinked too long. There was no celebration, no applause, just awkward silence and a few sit-along glances that said everything words didn't. By the time she returned to her dorm, her inbox had already changed. 3 congratulatory emails, one from Dr. Levinson, one from a visiting postdoc she barely knew, and one anonymous. And 2 more, not so kind. One read, "Enjoy the spotlight. You won't last." The other, "This isn't your stage. You're a placeholder." Jess saw her expression and didn't ask. She just handed her a cup of tea and turned on music that filled the silence like armor. But Amara didn't need comfort. She needed a plan. The national tournament was 6 weeks away. Callahan, as her assigned advisor, held their first meeting in his office the next day. He didn't stand when she walked in, didn't offer a seat. "You'll be competing against students from Caltech, MIT, Princeton," he said, tapping a folder. "They've been preparing for years. You have 6 weeks, I understand. I've designed a training protocol," he continued, sliding the folder across the table. "If you follow it exactly, you might survive." Amara opened it. 80 pages. No fluff, no encouragement, just raw mechanics. It was the most brutal, brilliant, unforgiving thing she'd ever seen. She smiled. "I'll start tonight." Callahan studied her, and for the first time, there was something almost human in his gaze. Not warmth, not pride, just curiosity. "Why physics?" he asked, genuinely. Amara paused. "When I was 9, I saw this documentary about gravitational waves. Everyone else in my class was bored. I couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks. I started reading, learning equations before I understood the words behind them." She looked up. It made the world make sense. Callahan didn't reply, but he didn't need to. They both understood the weight of that answer. The training was ruthless. Every morning at 6 a.m., Amara woke up and worked on quantum state reduction. By noon, she was buried in wave function collapse theory. Afternoons were spent decoding obscure papers from Russian and Japanese physicists no one else in her class had heard of. Evenings, practice problems Callahan left anonymously on her desk. No names, no feedback, just equations so complex they looked like art. And every time she solved one, she pinned it to her wall. By week 3, her dorm room looked like a mad scientist's brain exploded. Jess walked in one night and froze. "You haven't slept in 2 days, she said. "I'll sleep after the tournament. You said that last week." Amara didn't respond. She couldn't afford to break pace now. But as she pushed forward, the whispers returned. Wesley, still bitter from his loss, started telling people the judges were pressured, that Callahan had rigged the selection, that Amara had been chosen to make the department look progressive. The worst part, some people believed it. She heard the murmurs in the cafeteria, saw the looks in the hallway, and one afternoon, she walked into the lab and found a sticky note on her locker. "Token." She tore it off, folded it neatly, and placed it in her pocket. Didn't cry, didn't react, but when she met with Callahan later that day, she didn't ask about physics. She asked something else. "Do you think they're right?" she said. "Do you think I'm a placeholder?" He didn't answer right away. Then finally, "No. I think you're a weapon." The only question is whether you'll strike or crack. She nodded, then turned the page of the next problem set. The National Physics Invitational wasn't just a competition, it was a stage, held in a sprawling, glass-walled auditorium in Boston. It looked more like a corporate summit than an academic event. Giant screens displayed rotating equations, university banners hung like battle flags, and students walked with the quiet confidence of those who had spent their entire lives being told they were the best. Amara had arrived the night before. She barely slept, not from nerves, but from anticipation. She'd memorized every variation of the previous 10 years' finals, every trick, every misdirect, every underhanded question designed to separate the merely brilliant from the truly rare. Still, when she entered the arena, the size of it hit her like a wall. The other contestants noticed her immediately. Some glanced and looked away. Some whispered. A few stared, surprised, skeptical. She wasn't wearing a blazer, no Ivy League crest on her bag, no entourage of faculty, just her notebook, a cheap pen, and that same quiet she always carried like armor. Back at Whitford, the physics department gathered to watch the live stream. Levinson sat up front, arms crossed. Callahan stood near the back, unreadable as ever. Students filled the seats, eyes on the screen. She's going up against Parker Kim from MIT, someone whispered. That guy published a paper at 16. Whitford's never won this before, another added. This is going to be a bloodbath. Callahan didn't say a word. He just kept watching. The competition began with a team round, randomized groups of 3. Amara was paired with a student from Stanford and another from Johns Hopkins. Neither spoke to her at first. They divided tasks without including her. But 5 minutes in, she noticed a miscalculation in the thermal coefficient matrix. She spoke up. .com.direct. They ignored her. So she rewrote the section herself and submitted it. When the judges announced the top 3 teams for accuracy, their team ranked second. Suddenly, they listened. Next came the solo challenge. 30 minutes. One problem. Projected on a screen the size of a movie theater. A chaotic mess of particle interactions under variable gravity conditions. A brutal fusion of mechanics, energy flow, and time dilation. Amara sat still. Everyone else began writing furiously. She didn't. Not at first. She closed her eyes, visualized the system, listened to the logic beneath the chaos. Then, she began. She moved slowly at first, sketching the shape of the solution. Then faster, the pen a blur across the page. Her process didn't follow the standard path. She carved her own. When time was called, she dropped her pen, heart racing. She'd done it. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Back at Whitford, silence filled the room. The problem had been displayed live on screen. Most of the students couldn't even follow it. But Levinson leaned forward, whispering to himself, "She's rewriting the model." Callahan didn't move, didn't blink, but inside, he was running through the math in his head and realizing she'd chosen the one path no one else would have dared take. Not even him. As the judges deliberated, students mingled. Some traded theories, others compared answers. Amara sat alone, rereading her notes, until someone approached. It was Parker Kim, MIT's golden child. He sat beside her without speaking at first. Then finally, "That was gutsy," he said. "What you did with the field collapse, no one's ever tried that." She looked up, surprised. "Thanks, I wouldn't have thought of it," he admitted. "Most of us wouldn't." There was no sarcasm, no condescension, just a respect. Then he added, "You're from Whitford, right?" She nodded. He smiled. "Not anymore. You're from everywhere now." The results came in an hour later. Amara didn't win first place. She placed second. But it wasn't a loss, because when her name was announced, Amara Wells, Whitford University, the applause was louder than for the winner. Not because she had outscored expectations, but because she had redefined them. Second place in a room where most didn't even believe she should have made it through the door. That was seismic, and the judges knew it. One of them, an old physicist with a British accent and Nobel credentials, stopped her as she walked off stage. "You've got a mind built for this," he said. "Don't let anyone box it in." She nodded, barely able to speak. Back at Whitford, the reaction was mixed. Some celebrated, others stayed silent. A few tried to pretend it didn't matter, but the truth was unavoidable. She had done what no one from their program had ever done, and she had done it alone. When she returned to campus, there was no parade, no article in the school paper, just a quiet email from the department. "Well done. We're proud." But her peers had changed. Some still avoided her, uncomfortable with what she represented. Others approached with cautious admiration. And a few began asking questions. "How did you study? Where did you learn that method? Can you help me understand this paper?" She answered when she could, but she wasn't here to be their tutor. She was here to keep climbing. A week after the competition, she was called to Callahan's office. No context, no subject line, just a message, "Come." She arrived to find him seated, not standing. He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat. There was a long silence before he spoke. "I watched the stream," he said. "I assumed. You didn't follow the standard model," he continued. "You introduced a rotational adjustment no one's ever used in that context before." She nodded. "It just made more sense that way." He leaned back. "I wouldn't have thought of it." That sentence hung in the air like a thunderclap. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just said, "That's why I used it." He folded his hands. "You've forced this department to confront something it doesn't want to see. That brilliance doesn't always come from legacy or polish. Sometimes it comes from necessity." She said nothing. He continued, "I was hard on you because I didn't want the department using you as a mascot, a story. I wanted you to earn this in a way no one could deny." She raised an eyebrow. "And if I had cracked, then I would have been right," he said. "But I wasn't." Finally, he leaned forward and opened a drawer. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. She opened it. Inside was a recommendation letter for a doctoral program. Admit, signed by him, handwritten. She looked up, stunned. "I'm not finished here," she said. "No," he replied, "but the world's already asking for you. When you're ready, don't let this place keep you small." There was no warmth in his voice, but there was something deeper. Respect. Months passed. The campus moved on, as it always did. New announcements filled the bulletin boards. New students wandered the halls. New rumors took root. But something had shifted. Not in volume, in weight. Professors who once looked through her now nodded when she passed. Students who once avoided her now sat beside her in study groups, quietly, respectfully. Her name, once spoken in whispers, now lived in footnotes, lesson plans, and reshaped expectations. She hadn't just won respect. She'd shifted the curve. Amara never bragged, never posted about the competition, never corrected the rumors that still tried to downplay what she'd done. She didn't have to. The silence was proof enough. The way Callahan now paused before addressing her in class. The way Wesley never made eye contact again. The way Levinson invited her to co-author a paper, not as a student assistant, but as a collaborator. Those were her trophies, unseen, undeniable. One evening, she sat in the same seat where it all began, back row, lecture hall, physics 2. Callahan stood at the front, mid-lecture, chalk in hand. He turned to the board, posed a question, and waited. Silence. No hands. Amara almost smiled. Then, slowly, a freshman near the front raised her hand. Callahan nodded. She answered, awkwardly, hesitantly, but she answered. Callahan nodded again, just once, then returned to the board. Amara sat back, eyes on the ceiling. It had begun again. Another cycle, another challenger. And maybe, one day, another name whispered through the halls for reasons no one saw coming. That night, she walked the campus alone, stars overhead, notebook in hand. She didn't know where she'd go next. Caltech. Somewhere in Europe. The options were there, waiting. But she wasn't in a hurry, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to escape a place that didn't believe in her. She was leaving one she had reshaped, with nothing but her mind, and her refusal to back down.